What's happening?
We have started, Pamela, so if you want to welcome people to the session, that would be great.
Hello. Thank you very, very much for attending this session. This is the fifth or sixth time, I think, that the London Regional Group has appeared at the London Language Show. I've just got a couple of minutes just to tell you very, very briefly that the LRG is one of the regional groups of ITI. We started in 1994 at the beginning of the year because we'd actually forgotten it was our anniversary. We celebrated our 25th anniversary with a magnificent cake, and members did a kind of speed networking session at our favorite pub in London. And then, of course, we did have one more live meeting, which was Kirsty Heimel-Morgan and Suama Mwalem talking about high-level medical interpreting, which was a very, very successful event held in conjunction with the University of Westminster with a very large live audience. And then, of course, we had lockdown. So we've had 3 or 4 online meetings since then, including one most recently with Deborah and Cecilia on remote simultaneous interpreting. We had a wonderful virtual tour of Dulwich with Jane Jones and the Dulwich Art Gallery in the summer. And now here we are at the London Language Show, and I will leave it to Cecilia to take forward this online presentation of a SWOT analysis of translation and interpreting during COVID-19.
So, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We are broadcasting this from London, as this is the London Language Show, and we're very well. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. We are with you, joining you from different parts of London, which is the area where the group is actually hosted. So we're going to start the session. Our first speaker is going to be Deborah Chobanian, who's going to introduce herself. Then we're going to listen to Pat Wheeler, and I will be presenting at the end. You're welcome to leave your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screens. Please note that only the questions entered there are the ones we're going to be answering at the end of the session. So Deborah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. I hope you can all hear us well. Please feel free to place your comments in the chat. We are monitoring this chat, and feel free to use the Q&A function as well. And we will have a Q&A session at the end. So we will be reading your questions and answering them. The theme of our talk for today is a SWOT analysis of translation and interpreting in times of COVID. Because we don't have a lot of data from our professional organizations and other organizations, everyone is trying to figure out what's going on. We are trying to convey to you our personal views and our personal observations of these situations. Therefore, I've prepared a few slides to share with you on the topics that I'm more familiar with. So the first topic talking about today is translation. Even though I do a lot of conference interpreting, I still work as a translator, and I translate for private clients, and also I translate for companies, and I have a few very good agencies that I still work with. So in terms of translation, for us translators, not much has changed. We've always worked remotely. We were always very reliant on technology. We had to use our own systems, know how to use different CAT systems. So we were quite ready for this situation because we were already working by ourselves or remotely with our colleagues. So in that sense, our day-to-day routine hasn't changed much. However, especially for those of us who rely on workflow coming from agencies, many agencies are experiencing financial pressures, and we could see that in the form of the RWS and SDL merger. So they were experiencing financial difficulties. Many very large, well-established agencies had to put their employees on furlough. They had to rely on all forms of help available to them. And obviously, many companies, many of their clients have canceled work. So some areas like medical translation and financial translation, they kept going, but some other areas have been impacted. So as a result of that, there's a pressure on price, and many large organizations have written to their freelancers stating that they wanted to renegotiate rates. And a lot of people have been experiencing that. In terms of opportunities, because we are having to, in some ways, readjust a little bit how we work, who we work with, it's a good time to try and tap into new sources of income, and especially try and have some more exposure. So maybe we can look for different types of clients, and not just have one stream of income. Um, in terms of threats, obviously, I think the overall sustainability of the industry is a very serious threat, because we have very large players who are responsible for providing work for a high number of freelancers. And if they are no longer with us, we may have very gigantic companies who may dominate a lot the market. But at the moment, we don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I think only when things stabilize for some time and we are able to see market reports coming up from ITI, from the ATC, and also from NIMSD, we will be able to see how the industry is impacted. In terms of conference interpreting, which is the form of interpreting I work the most, I don't do much public service interpreting anymore, and obviously consecutive interpreting has been very impacted because we are in lockdown now and there aren't many meetings, so we can't really go to places. In terms of conference interpreting, there's been a lot of adaptation because we always worked on site. Some of us were already doing remote simultaneous interpreting, but it was a very small portion of the market. Obviously, now it's most of the market. We are very lucky in the UK for having three interpreting hubs in the UK that may help us to ensure the sustainability of the industry in the long term, because when events return to the UK, hopefully they will return. Probably we were probably looking to 2022 by the looks of it. We do need these companies to be sustainable, and we need them to be there to provide the right equipment to us, or maybe provide hybrid solutions. So it's good that at least we've got three companies that are adapting to this new situation. And both Cecilia and I had the opportunity to work in two different hubs. So if you have any questions about it, please place in the chat or in the Q&A, and we can try to reply to your questions. In terms of weaknesses, obviously, because when events migrated online, they turn into very short events, whereas before we would work for a full day, for several days. Now we're working for blocks of hours, 2 hours, 3 hours. Now there's a pressure on rates as well, because obviously, they expect employers and organizers expect us to charge less because we're working less hours. From our interpreting side, what we're trying to do is to explain that there's there's a lot of work behind those blocks of hours, so we cannot just charge per hour. So a lot of us have been charging per project and detailing everything that we have to do to prepare for an assignment. So obviously we don't just turn up. We have to do a lot of preparation, a lot of studying, a lot of many meetings to prepare for sometimes what's a very, very short event. We had to obviously move as well from relying on all our equipment to be provided to us to now having to have our own equipment. There are many organizations which are publishing guidelines to help us. For instance, AIC has guidelines, ITI has guidelines, which are very helpful, and many colleagues who are running events. And we're still trying to work out what works best for us working remotely. The UK obviously experiences connection issues. Everyone knows about it. We have many areas which don't have good broadband coverage, and that has an impact for interpreters working from home as well. Just to give you an example, last year I upgraded my connection because I already worked from home, but it was a huge endeavor. I had to get my council to authorize a new cable to be installed in my building, and I live in central London, so it's very surprising that central London doesn't have very good coverage. And as a result of the pandemic, I installed a second internet connection with a failover. So because I'm working from home and I have to rely on my internet, now I have two connections to fall back to in case one experiences any issues. In terms of opportunities, now the market is global, is not local anymore, because either we would serve events in the UK or we would travel for an event abroad. Obviously, now we are working online, so we can work with colleagues from everywhere. And this is something that the industry and us interpreters will have to understand how we can deal with that, how we can collaborate without precarizing our working conditions and preserving our sources of income. And in terms of threats, it would be difficult to say what is going to happen in the future, what formats we're going to see in the future. We also experienced an issue with many remote simultaneous interpreting platforms because they were used to a certain level of workload, and now everyone has moved online. Obviously, Zoom, with the fact that they have the integrated interpreting tool, has enabled many jobs to take place, which wouldn't be able to take place in the past. So that has helped as well, even though it's a very difficult tool to work with, is very limited for us, but at least it's something that we have. And just coming to my last slide now. In terms of the overall picture, it's a time to build resilience, and we are already very resilient. Most of us are freelance, most of us have to find our own clients. But now everyone is being tested to their limits, and we can't plan either because no one has faced this situation. So it's very hard to plan for something that is virtually unplannable. The positive side of it is being the increase of online networking and collaboration. I think I've always collaborated, many of us here, the LRG, Cecilia, Pamela, and our colleagues at LRG, we've always fostered collaboration, but I felt that many of our colleagues are more and more meeting online, trying to work out the situation together and support each other. In terms of weaknesses, it's quite hard to deal with this level of isolation, not being able to be with your colleagues, especially for conference interpreting. It's very hard for us to support each other during a job. And again, we don't know what the future will hold for especially conference interpreting. In terms of opportunities, it is more important than ever to try and upscale your capacity, because if you don't have a very resilient business model, it will be even harder to survive in the future. In terms of threats, just to conclude in the last 2 minutes I have, obviously there's been a pressure on income for a lot of us. It's very hard to see how we are going to get out of this situation and what shape the industry will get out of this situation. But at the same time, those of us who survive this period will be able to survive anything. But we need to be prepared for an ever evolving scenario, because the stability we sort of knew doesn't exist anymore. So I know I'm providing more questions than answers. However, I think it's important for us to come together, to share experiences, and to support each other. So that's why I thought it would be good just to conclude with these thoughts. And yes, that's the end of my slide deck. So thank you very much, Cecilia, and I'll pass on the floor to you right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to be answering questions at the end of the session. Already, we've been getting lots of questions in the Q&A section. It's at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to add your questions there. Now we move on to Pat. I don't want to waste much time, because I want us to have time to answer your questions at the end. So Pat, the floor is yours. Pat, you had to unmute yourself, please.
Hello. Now, Deborah has covered a great deal of ground. I am these days a translator, but not an interpreter. So, passing over what she's had to say about interpreting, I'd like to focus on translation and how the clients for translation are dealing with us and how we then deal with them. Now, a key issue, of course, for the client is how much is this job going to cost us? Well, they may, if they approach you as a translator in the right field with the right background, be asking you to quote them. Now, that is a very important process, because as just one individual, you do not know what they have in their heads, and you don't want to ask them, how much are you thinking of paying? Because we have to very often set a price, because we know what our work is worth, don't we? If we are seasoned translators, we know that, either from experience, because we have worked in-house for very reputable organizations and they have paid us a salary, or we have worked freelance for long enough to have a good idea of what the market offers. Well, what the market offers is going to change in different circumstances, and the situation we're going through now is one of depression. That is depression not necessarily in ourselves, but of the economy. And the translation industry, if we call it an industry, is definitely part of the economy. It's an essential part, and we need to be aware of that, because the client, like any business is going to want to reduce its costs as far as possible. It comes to us electronically, and we send the product back electronically, so there are no transport costs involved, no on costs really of any kind to the client. But we need to know how much it ought to be worth. And I've been battling for a long time myself with the difference between hourly rates and rates per word or per 1,000 words. It is commoner for the client to think in terms of quantity, not time. That is, how many 1,000 words does this document contain, or portions of thousands? And that is okay. That is okay if you are then satisfied with what they are going to offer. But if they are offering a very low rate, you might do better by negotiating with them. And I do think that negotiation is a skill we all need to develop. It's something that can be done on the phone, by email. We do not risk losing the job if we do some negotiating with the client. Now, I was quite shocked this week to receive a request from an agency I'd never heard of before, which was going to offer £9 an hour to translators for a particular project. And now the national minimum wage is £8.72, so you can see that that is a very low rate. So I don't know how people have responded to this particular agency, but an appropriate response would be, look, that is far too low because the national minimum wage is only £8.72. And I am definitely worth more than that. If I have got the skills and experience to do your job and do it well, then I am worth, okay, then how much per hour? If this client wants you to quote per hour, or is thinking in terms of the time you will have to spend, then you can tell the client how many words you would expect to be able to translate in an hour. Yes, however, if it is an editing or proofreading job, and sometimes there are, that is very difficult to judge. And it is jobs which do not have a precise word count that you need to be ready to quote for in terms of the time that you expect to take. Now, you can do that from your previous experience, or you can have in your mind already, and I always have in my mind, an idea of the value of my work per hour, a figure that I like to quote. Now, it may be that the client doesn't want to accept that figure. If you say, well, if this job takes 2 hours, I would expect to invoice you for £70. They may think that's too much. But you've got to have an idea, I think, of how far down you're willing to go to meet the client. The client wants the job done as cheaply and as quickly as possible. So there needs to be a discussion between you and the client about how much it's going to cost the client. And I think that is the first thing really to emphasize that that discussion may need to take place early on. Certainly, if you are interested in taking the job, but not interested in the rate they are offering, it is quite reasonable to say to them that you would not find that rate acceptable given your experience and qualifications, but you would do it for X pounds per hour, and you would expect, from what they've told you, you would expect it to take, let's say, 3.5 to 4 hours. Now that gives the client a pretty good idea of what they would be paying for your work, which of course they haven't yet seen if this job is coming out of the blue. They haven't seen your work. So that's really the first thing, how to quote. And I do think it's useful to have in mind that £8.72 as a kind of level to which you do not wish to sink, you see. Yes, so how to quote and how much to quote is really the same whether we are going through an economic crisis or when not. Because there is no doubt, I think, and this is the weakness of the situation, that so many activities have been impacted by the pandemic. There is less work, that's certainly the impression I am getting, for translators. Okay, but the risk to us as a profession is that we then allow that factor to depress our earnings unacceptably. After all, we need to be able to live on our earnings, and we need to be able to charge a reasonable rate for our work.
Pat, sorry to interrupt. You have
Yes.
a 2-minute warning, so we can move on to the next session, please.
Oh yes, that
Thank
really
you.
is the nub of what I wanted to say. So thank you, Cecilia. Let's move.
Oh, thank you very much. So we move on then to the third presentation and last presentation of the session before moving on to Q&A. Deborah, if you don't mind, stop sharing your screen so I can put up my slides. Thank you very much. So I hope you can see this now. So yes, we are going to, obviously, as it says on the tin, be focusing on a SWOT analysis of the situation under COVID. For those of you who don't know me, well, my name is Cecilia Lipovsek. I'm a diplomatic interpreter based in London. And most of my work, about 80 to 90% of my work, is through my own direct clients. And that is the experience I'm going to be sharing with you today. So the world right now is upside down. I don't think this is news to anyone. This is how we are living and the situation that we are facing. So I think that is incredibly timing. And it's incredibly good timing that we do a SWOT analysis of what is going on. I barely work with translations, so I'm very sorry for all the translators who are kindly joining our session today, but I can only share my own experience as an interpreter, and Deborah anyway already covered quite a lot of ground together with Pat related to translation. So the first thing about COVID, the pandemic and lockdowns and all the restrictions that they imply and entail and brought into our lives is that there is no way to hide. Everything that's good in our lives, both personal and professional, is very much highlighted, but everything that is bad and weak is also very much highlighted. So in a way, it's like extreme honesty through COVID. And that also affects our work life and the way that we carry on with our business and our profession. So honesty first, weaknesses. So as a diplomatic interpreter and conference interpreter, as well as most interpreters in the world, my profession and our profession is a face-to-face one. So we go to where our clients need us. I go to where the meeting is taking place. I go to where the conference is happening. And now that is becoming a weakness. Also, my business until COVID and the interpreting profession in general has always been very location centric in the sense that either clients hire local interpreters whenever they are traveling, or even when we quote our work, we are paid um, we are paid depending on where we are and whether we had to work outside our professional domiciles. So it has been traditionally a very location-centric profession. It has also had historically a very strong offline approach, not only for remote interpreting that until COVID was regarded as a lesser form of interpreting, at least for conference interpreters, but also because interpreters in general do not have strong online presence, and it's actually something that is traditionally frowned upon. We also had quite a weak use of technology because technology was dealt for us. We were already doing a lot and we carried our own weight with interpreting. So we had a lot of a hands-off approach. The event was organized, travel was organized, any tech setup was organized and monitored for us. We were doing our interpreting. And these features of the interpreting profession in the current scenario are becoming weaknesses for us. However, I'm a very positive person, and I do think that we are all stronger than we think, and that as many weaknesses as we might find in our profession, there's also a lot of strength. And these strengths are, first of all, we can work remotely. There are lots of professions who cannot work remotely. There was a very funny meme going on at the beginning of lockdowns where a bricklayer was doing home office and remote work, and this poor chap was sitting at his dining room table, and instead of a chair next to him, he had the concrete mixer trying to work from home. But I mean, it's very funny, but that is a reflection of the reality that some professions can adapt to remote work and some professions cannot. So in a sense, we're very lucky. As interpreters, I consider that we are key workers, and I put this in inverted commas out of the huge respect for all those people who are looking after those who get sick and those who need help the most. Still, people in times of crisis need to communicate, and they need to keep talking, and they need to arrange and organize a lot of things. So the nature of our work might change, and there might be less conferences in the traditional sense of it, but there are a lot more meetings and a lot more other types of online events because the world has to keep going, and we had to keep rolling the ball, and we had to keep working. Another strength, and Deborah mentioned this, is that interpreting is very versatile as a profession, and interpreters, as you know, our nature is usually very versatile and therefore resilient. We have low overheads, so we don't have to pay um, rent for a physical brick and mortar store. So we can lower our overheads on one hand, and we can try to adapt in a way. We're inherently collaborative, although some nasty characters are always around in the professional community. We do work together. And fortunately, there was a development of remote simultaneous interpreting before COVID, and we could sort of ride and piggyback on it and continue to grow from March onwards. Now, I know that this is how we all feel. I feel this way too, at least once a day, if not more than once a day. But we had to be aware of the fact that this is how we feel and that there are some threats. Threats in the sense of change, things that were not away and now are sort of showing their ugly face in the horizon. So first of all, the threat of having to build a digital existence, which was difficult considering that there was an offline approach historically in our profession. There's the threat of a global marketplace that has its, upsides, but also a downsides, because now, depending on a language combination, I'm not just competing with the interpreters in London or in Europe, I'm competing with all Spanish. I'm a Spanish A interpreter. So any Spanish A interpreter in the world is now part of my marketplace. So I had to be aware of that. We also had to be aware of time zones. We used to be where the event was. So 8 a.m. start was 8 a.m. start. And now an 8 a.m. start somewhere is not my 8 a.m. start. So which means that our workday is getting longer or shorter, or there are greater constraints. Also, we are faced with untrained clients. So clients used to know how to organize a face-to-face event. They understood conference booth, they understood portable equipment, they understood what had to happen, and we are now all learning together. So there's a lot more preparation, especially when dealing with direct clients, because clients don't know. And I mean, it's not their fault. They are learning together with us. And actually, we had to learn first and explain things to them second. So this is another sort of threat or downside to the situation. With a global marketplace, there are lots more pseudo interpreters out there, which are always a threat to our profession. They are a threat not because they can do a job with the same quality levels and commitment that a professional interpreter can, but because a client that has a bad experience with a pseudo interpreter may not want to work with an interpreter ever again. So we had to contend with that, and we had to contend with the people who are pretending to be interpreters, as well as with those who offer these people's services. And one of the trends that is now sort of, popping in the horizon is the increasing development of artificial intelligence, and lots of claims that you can just put some audio file or connect something and magically is going to be interpreted into another language. So this is something that is here, it's not going to go away, and we have to see how we respond to it. So how do we respond to it? Well, by embracing opportunities. So change, as difficult and as scary as it is, also brings lots of opportunities. And the biggest opportunity that we have, in my personal opinion, is that we are now forced, with this brutal honesty the pandemic is bringing, to raise the bar. We cannot just continue, sliding by and getting away with things. We had to bring it, and we had to bring it to the table every single time, now more than ever. And in raising the bar, we're going to set ourselves apart from pseudo interpreters, artificial intelligence, and any other sort of makeshift solution that is being offered in the market. We have the opportunity and the necessity of reformulating our value proposition. My value proposition is that I'm in London, but now it's no longer just a geographical advantage point. Now I had to make it worth, I had to explain it in a different way. I have to reconsider the services that I offer, how I offer them, what else can I offer as a one-stop solution to my clients on top of just interpreting. And this is where opportunities rise, when you are willing to open your mind and start rethinking the situation. This entails a new marketing approach, because we can no longer communicate what we could. I like to plan my posting ahead, and I had lots of posts planned, for example, about interpreting in different settings and where to stand and where to sit and how to, move around, for example, high-ranking dignitaries. That is no longer a marketing a marketing proposal, because we are all online. So it doesn't matter where I sit because I'm standing here at my desk. So I had to rethink how I market my services. And that's going to bring lots of creativity into play and new ways of explaining our profession, which, in my opinion, again, I think are necessary. They have been necessary for many, many years. And now we can no longer play dumb and not do it. Working from home and working remotely, even if it is from home or from local hubs, which somebody was asking, local hubs in the UK are in London, in Cambridge, and in Edinburgh, is going to continue to be a trend. Once the pandemic is over, once face-to-face conference interpreting and diplomatic interpreting returns, remote work is not going to go away. We're going to continue doing it with different, proportions of our monthly or annual workload, but it's going to stay. And it is going to allow us to have healthier lifestyles. I mean, interpreters who have lots of work know this. Peak season means that we live out of a suitcase and eat out of conference catering or hotel breakfast bars. So a healthier lifestyle, it's something that we can have as an opportunity because of a pandemic that is affecting our health. I mean, I know, I get the irony of it, but that's the thing. And if it involves less traveling, then it's also going to help lower our carbon footprint, because it might not be necessary for an interpreter to fly over to another city or to another country for a 2-hour event. That event might be held online. So there will be, I think it will be more of a selective process to tackle all of these things. And we're going to be able to do our little, bit for the environment that also causing this pandemic. So this is a very quick overview because I see that you have lots of questions and I want to leave room for it. So in order to conclude, one last thought. With the pandemic and everything that's going on, actually I should say more specifically, or even more so because of the pandemic, although I always believe this should be the case, we should always lead with generosity. There's no other way of working. Interpreting is collaborative with our colleagues, with our community, and with our clients, and we are all in this together. So there are threats. There's the threat that economies might crash, that a payment chain might be interrupted, that other interpreters in other parts of the world are getting the work, that some sneaky clients or sneaky agencies are trying to push prices down and rates down and so on and so on. But the best argument and the best approach to all of this is to understand that we are in this together. And this is a moment, and that's the biggest opportunity of all, to show our clients that when we say we are part of their team, we mean it. So thank you for listening. That's all I wanted to share as part of my presentation, and I'm happy to take calls. Not calls, questions, sorry.
Cecilia,
Yes.
I've been working through the questions whilst you were
Yes,
doing your
so I
talk.
was while
Yeah,
you were
I was.
talking.
So we've already answered 16 questions, but we have a
Okay,
few more questions coming up. So do you mind if I just try and answer some of those
of
now?
course. Yeah,
And
let's go. We have time now. We have
we
about 15 minutes,
yeah,
so we
we've
can do
got
it.
16 minutes.
Yeah.
So in terms of just for the translators here, just to add a little bit more, in my experience as a translator, I still work for a few agencies who are excellent. They pay me well, they treat me well, they treat their clients well. But what is their USP? Their USP is quality, not price. So that's why I kept those. And the other stream of income I have as well is certified translation. And even during the pandemic, I felt that that workflow continued quite steadily. And I provide notarized translations as well. And my notary, my local notary, he was still working even during lockdown by appointment. We drop documents in a safe way. He notarizes them, and then I collect them. And the fact that I could continue to offer that service has been very useful for my clients, and also it has been very useful as an alternative source of income. So for the translators out there who are based in the UK, this is a very good service you may wish to try and provide, which is not tied up to having to work with an agency. But what I would say to you as well is that not all agencies are bad clients. You do have very good clients out there, but you need to find them. And also, you need to be a good translator. You need to know how to serve your clients, how to answer to emails in a professional manner, how to provide and quote for jobs in a professional manner, and how to show that you add value to what they are offering to their clients. You know, it's very well for complaining, but there are good opportunities out there. So we have to find those too. Cecilia, I don't know
Yes,
if
I
you want
wanted to
to.
add something.
Yeah,
So, because we're talking about agencies, so I said about 80 to 85% of my work is with my own direct clients, but I do work with a few agencies. And again, not all agencies for interpreters are bad. Yeah, not all agencies are the devil. Some
exactly.
are, and some are very big devils, but others not. So the key to
Exactly.
finding a good agency, first of all, is to know that what you bring to the table is top notch. So you are only as good as the work that you do, because this is work. And then look for those agencies that, yes, have a sort of the unique selling point based on quality, because they want to work with professional interpreters. But also you need to find agencies whose biggest load of work is aligned to what you are looking to do. So I'm big with diplomatic work, with anything that had to do with that arena. So I'm not particularly interested in working for pharmaceutical companies or in the medical conference sector in a way. So an agency that is very big on that is not very much aligned with me. So then you had to decide, so how much priority you're going to assign to those clients and which agencies you're going to get. But it's the same as with any direct client. You had to be a valuable member of their own team. So you might not do your branding and your sort of selling points, but you still had to do your marketing, and you still had to do your customer service
Yes.
with an agency.
Yes.
Connect with the project managers, be there when they need you, understand what they are trying to achieve, and help them look after their own clients. And that's where you form partnerships with agencies, which is the way to go. Now,
Do you
yes,
mind if I just answer
of course.
a few more questions live that have
Yes,
been placed here? For everyone here, I'm just placing in the chat two programs that are business development programs for freelancers and also for small companies that both Cecilia and I have undertaken, and they've been very useful for us to raise our bar. So one of them is the Innovating for Growth. There is a program for startups and a program for more established freelancers. These programs train you on how to sell your business skills, and they are completely for free. So
at the British Library. Yes.
if you go to the British Library website, and they are now all online. So before you had to be based in London, but now you can take them from anywhere. And the other one that I highly recommend is called Hatch Female Founders. If you type Hatch Female Founders, you find their website. I'll try and place in the chat later. They have, again, a program for startups and a program for well-established freelancers. And they've been key for me to raise the bar and sell my services, understand how I reach my own clients. In terms of the community interpreter transition from being a community interpreter to a conference interpreter that some people have asked in the Q&A, Danielle Paulo has asked about that, and also Barbara is asking a different question. I'll try and answer your question in a minute, Barbara. I did a master in conference interpreting because the skills are very different. If you go to conference interpreting without proper training, you're going going to commit professional suicide. We had some colleagues who did transition with CPD training as opposed to master training, but that was a very different situation because they were working on site, they were training with colleagues, and some in very rare languages they had to self-train. But I would say that in this current circumstance, you can't hide bad interpreting anymore. And clients are really raising the bar because the only thing they hear is the interpreting right now. You don't have any other distractions. So we cannot justify bad interpreting anymore. So if this is something you have to do, I would say it might not be a master level training, maybe a CPD training, but you have to do some proper conference interpreting training to transition from community interpreting to conference interpreting. You can't just jump from one to the other because now there's no one to help you. You are not in the booth together with someone else who's going to support you anymore. You have to know what you're doing. So I hope I have answered your question. And then we had another question about conference interpreters with less experience and who want to get experience. There are a lot of volunteering opportunities. So Lisa, go to my website and drop me an email, and I'll drop you some links on volunteering experiences. And also there are groups who practice together and they refer each other for jobs. And one thing you might want to do as well is try and look for organizations, for instance, Amnesty International and other NGOs who do hire interpreters directly, and they do hire new interpreters because they want to give them a chance. But yes, go on, Cecilia.
I know, just going to wrap up your thought, and I want to add something to this topic.
Okay. Yes, so I think that's the
Yeah.
best
Okay.
way forward, Lisa. And let me just
Another
see.
way that you can start working if you don't have a lot of experience. So yes, volunteering, definitely. Yes, those practice groups like WISE, which are very good. And also the old-fashioned way still applies, which is starting out with senior interpreters. You had to do your research, you had to approach them properly. Don't just come on and say, hey, I want work, I'm just starting, can you help me? No, you had to build a relationship with senior interpreters and trust and invite them to jobs or assignments that are easy enough for you to start on, and always have somebody with more experience together with you that can give you feedback and can help you out with this. So that's the way of doing it.
Yes.
Yes.
And Maxine has asked, how do you charge if you're only starting out? Maxine, whether you're starting out and you're well established, you're not going to charge very different rates.
No.
Because if you charge, I mean, if an interpreter approaches me for a job I'm organizing as a consultant interpreter and they ask me for a very low fee, I would be very suspicious. I wouldn't actually hire that one. I would prefer to hire someone asking for a higher fee and say, look, I have this budget for this job, which is actually quite reasonable. Would you mind taking it? Are you happy with this? Rather than getting someone who wants to charge less. So I would say either you find for proper volunteering opportunities to get experience, or you have to charge the market average. And the reports I placed in the chat are very useful for you to understand what's the average of the UK market, because they do publish the average per language. I know that for interpreting is harder because we don't have these the same data, but what I would say to you is look for mentoring opportunities. The ITI has a mentoring scheme. The WISE group I can't recommend well enough. WISE is a fantastic collaboration group, and also you have many interpreters collaboration groups that you can join, and then you can ask your colleagues in the same language combination what's the average for your language combination, because you don't want to charge below the average. You want to be at the average or above the average as well. Otherwise, you're going to be doing everyone a disservice, and you're going to be doing yourself a disservice as well.
Yeah.
Go on, Cecilia.
Yes, just so there are two more questions that are related to this, both of them anonymous, but we're going to answer them anyway. So one of them is whether it's worth going into interpreting at this time. Yes, why not? It's always worth going into interpreting. It's a fascinating profession, and the best way to find interpreting agencies in the UK. And this goes back to getting started. I think that your main focus, if you are just graduating or you graduated in the last couple of years, is you have to invest as much time and energy as you can in networking. Network properly, join professional associations, attend events, attend panels, contribute, comment on people LinkedIn. People, interpreters who are sharing online are usually the fact that they are sharing online is saying, hey, I'm open to a discussion. So comment on them, learn to read people's reactions and build a network. This is, as I said, a highly collaborative profession. You need a network. Alone in your home, nothing is going to happen. So if you can't go face to face because that's not the way, then you can connect online. And that is actually an advantage because it's a lot easier. We have people connected to this session all over the world, which would never happen if we were face to face. So build your network, and from your network, you will also get sort of the real deal. You will get information about agencies, you will get information about rates, you will connect with people in your own language combination, you will connect with people from other booths, other languages who recommend you as well. So a strong network is your biggest guarantee and is your biggest assurance for the future. So do that, invest in building that as well.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm just going through the questions once more to
Yeah, we're
see if
not dealing
there's.
with technical issues related to remote
Yes,
interpreting.
I mean,
No,
the only thing that
not
we
today,
can
sorry.
say is that it is more stressful, it is tiring. However, it is what we have. There's nothing we can do. I mean, I'm sorry, I need to earn a living. I'm not rich, and we are in lockdown. We don't have many events, so we have to adapt to the situation. So I think one thing that the only thing we can do on a positive note is to make our work environment as comfortable as possible, to invest on our work environment, so to have a comfortable desk, a comfortable room, raise your computer to your eye level, very good equipment, very good computer with sound capacity, very high spec headsets, so you have to make the most of what you have, and make your work environment quite comfortable, because we cannot change externalities. We just can't do that. And complaining is not going to resolve the situation. So, I think a lot has improved from March to now, and I believe that a lot will improve. But it is what it is. And just so you know, I have placed the WISE seminars in the chat. So you've got the link in the chat. Virginia has placed the contact for Amnesty Interpreting Unit in the chat as well. So
Yeah,
take a
thank you,
note of
Virginia.
that.
That's a very good
Thank you, Virginia.
opportunity.
That's very, very helpful. And we have placed as well, I've placed the female founders, Natalie has placed the female founders London in the chat, which is very useful. And if anyone has any outstanding questions, feel free to contact us via the LRG website. And also Cecilia has her own website.
Yes,
I
and my
have my
details
own
are in
website.
my slide. It's in the
Yes.
recording that will be available in a couple of hours as well.
Yes, and I'm just placing my website link in the chat as well.
Yes,
So
me too.
just drop us an email. In this case, fill out the contact form, and then we'll get back to you if we can help with any specific questions.
Yes.
Pamela, we've got 2 minutes. Pamela, Cecilia, would you like to add anything else before we close the session?
I don't think I've got anything to add. I think you've all heard a lot today, and thank you so much to the three of you for sharing so much of your knowledge and experience with the chat and with the Q&A and with the live answers to questions. I think people have exchanged a lot of information. The only thing perhaps I would add, obviously, is a plug not only for LRG, but for all the many volunteer translation and interpreting organizations that exist, not just in the UK, but as Nicholas Parsons used to say, all over the world. In your country, in the place that you live, you will find such an organization. You need to search the web. And that's one of the best ways of finding out how to get into the profession, what's involved. One day when we can go back to meeting for real, then it's a great opportunity to meet up and chat with fellow professionals. I'd just like to close now for thanking Pat, Cecilia and Deborah, and also thank you very, very much to Jonathan for making all of this possible.
Okay, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank
Bye
you.
for now. I'm closing the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Cecilia.